Talking soccer with the voice of women's soccer on Fox. Actually lives right down the road from me, Farmington, Connecticut. I live in West Hartford. JP, we call it the 860. Great to talk to you. That's the area code there. Great to talk to someone from the 860. And tell us, what was it like for you to call the United States run through this World Cup tournament?
Well, they came in, Bill, as the favorites, target on their back, obviously, but they were expected to win. It was a little bit tougher, I think, than a lot of people thought it was going to be. They were contested once the knockout stage started. There were 3 straight 2-1 victories, and those games could have gone in a different direction had circumstances been a little bit different. Their best game was probably the game against France in that knockout stage, and that was probably the best atmosphere that I saw at this last World Cup. A pleasure to cover this team, maybe be a part of history, because how many times can teams win something like this back to back when you consider it's a 4-year gap?
So you've done it all. I'd love to hear how you feel about the crowd since you've seen it over some time. You've seen when this team was just getting going and the interest was getting going, and now obviously the juggernaut. Perhaps we should just say the national team and not the women's national team. So how did you find the crowds this year?
Well, the crowds in the games in the U.S. Leading up to it, the crowds were always great. They're so supportive of this team. It's a loyal fan base for sure. But in France, I would say, with the exception of the game where the U.S. played against France, they were always the home team. There were some games there, including the last game, that game against the Netherlands, where if you closed your eyes, you thought you were in the States somewhere. That was definitely a home crowd, a home field to it. When you walked the streets of France, you saw more USA jerseys than any other team, including France, now that I think of it. But that French game against the U.S. probably had the best atmosphere because the French are really proud of their team as well. And I think when the French players came out on the field, you heard this loud, loud ovation. When the U.S. players came out, it actually sounded louder, and I think it's because the U.S. wanted to drown out the French fans. So it created a great atmosphere. When you have supporters traveling from the different countries, it's always a festive atmosphere.
And speaking of a festive atmosphere, JP, a parade today for the World Cup champs right here in New York City. You can see some of these pictures. Quite a scene for this team now that has won back-to-back World Cups.
I watched it. It was on 2 different networks, maybe even more, but it was fascinating to see how these women arrived on those floats. The waving, the smiling, they just came off of a grueling stretch where they're playing 7 games in maybe less than 30 days. I'd have to do the math on it, but very tough schedule. Had to fly probably Sunday, maybe after the game, or Monday, get to New York. I mean, they're still having a big party, and yet there they were, eager to meet their fan base. I thought it was a fantastic parade. Great that the city was able to do that for a second time over 4 years.
Well, sometimes, as we know, finals disappoint. I covered the Champions League this year. I did not see a bad match. Perhaps the worst one I saw was actually the Champions League final. It was pretty close. I think it was a little bit close for comfort. What was the atmosphere in the stadium like? Was there enough of a sense that this was actually a nail-biter? It felt like it was at times.
Yeah, I think when it was 1-0, there's always a chance that something could happen, including a penalty kick, a VAR decision. Anything could go wrong against your team. So when it's 1-0, I think those are scary games. Once they got that second goal, they were in cruise control, and I never thought that the Netherlands could come back and get another goal to make it even closer. I think the only game that I really was worried about in that tournament was the France game, because I think player for player, they line up very well with France. It was a pick'em game. Home field advantage to France. I would not have been surprised if the French had won, but I felt very supremely confident that the U.S. could win every other game. The French game was the only one that I was concerned about.
JP, any way to look into the future and set expectations for this United States team going forward?
Well, I think the interesting part, Bill, is that there are, thinking back to this, 12 players 30 years of age or over. And some of them, like Alex Morgan, would be 34 at the next World Cup, so that's doable. Same with the Tobin Heath. But Carly Lloyd is going to be 37 soon. Megan Rapinoe is 34 now. Becky Sauerbrunn is 34 now. A lot of these players are not going to be there. They'll be there for the next Olympics, but they won't be there for the next World Cup. So I think, where do we go from here? Where's the next Rose Lavelle? Where's the next Mallory Pugh? the team will have to get younger just because of the age factor. Their average age was just under 29, which was the oldest at this World Cup. But it didn't seem to matter to them in this case because they were winners again.
As I understand, you were in France for 30 days. How did they treat you? I want to know, because when we go over to these countries, they're not exactly thrilled to just, hear the voice. French folks and English folks, they come over and they could say anything. And we're just like, oh, can you please say that again? How'd it go for you?
They were fantastic. I think the French people get a bad rap. As long as you, if you say please and thank you in French, or you make an attempt to order off the menu, they're very happy. The first time I went to France was at the 1998 World Cup, and I was working for ESPN at that time. And one of the things that they said in the meeting was, guys, don't be the ugly American, because if you are, we're going to send you on the first flight home. The French, contrary to what everyone is saying, don't hate us. Be nice to them. They'll be nice to you. And that's what I found. The French people were fantastic with us. That was at least my experience. Somebody else might have a different story to tell, but they were great to us.
So, JP, Shep Messing's going to be on the show tomorrow. Any advice?
Shep, I don't know if you know this, Bill, but Shep and I are both managing directors of the Connecticut Fusion. It's a team that plays in United Women's Soccer. It's a step below the NWSL and a step above college. It's the second year for the team, made the playoffs last year, undefeated this year, if I can brag about it. And then we play our playoff game Friday in Farmington. So Shep and I always wanted to run our own team. So it's great to work with him in this particular venture.
For more great videos from the MSG 150, check out right there. And remember, our show is on Monday through Thursday, 8 to 10:30 p.m. on MSG Network and MSG Go.